Wanted to go over a few examples of absolute value equations. This is new to us, but actually it's not new to us. It's using the same techniques that we used to solve equations, but now we just have an absolute value sign. So we need to account for that and make sure that we have the answers that will um, work both ways for absolute value. So you reviewed absolute value. And you know that if it's inside there, it could be both a positive and a negative, but the absolute value signs make it a positive number. So what we're going to do now is solve equations that have variables in them with absolute value. If you check in Google Classroom, you're going to see that there is a chart in there that kind of gives you an idea of what needs to happen. It'd be great to have that up as you're working on problems, just so you don't forget, but I think you guys are going to do great on this. So let's just hop on into our examples. So we have the absolute value of 3x equals 9. Well, really what this absolute value equation is going to mean is that we need to do two equations. Our first one is going to be the absolute value, 3x equals 9. We're going to set it up as 3x equals 9. And then our second equation, we'll do this color, is going to be 3x equals negative 9. And then we need to solve for both of these. So we're going to have two separate answers that x could possibly be. So 3 times x, in order to get rid of 3 to isolate our variable, we have to divide both sides by 3. And we're going to get that x equals 3. Now the same thing happens over here. We need to isolate our variable, so we're still going to divide both sides by 3, but we're going to get a different answer because negative 9 divided by 3 is going to give us negative 3. So in this particular equation, x could be 3 or negative 3. You're going to have two answers for it. And we can double check that. 3 times 3, the absolute value of that is 9. And we can also check that 3 times negative 3, that's going to give us negative 9, but the absolute value of that is still 9. So we can prove that that is true. So what we need to do is we need to take our equation, isolate the absolute value. That's the first thing we need to do. Make sure that our absolute value is by itself, and then set it up equal to both what the answer says and then the opposite of what it says, so positive and negative. So here's another example that's pretty straightforward. Whenever we see a fraction, we know that that is a division sign. So we're going to set it up as two equations. B over 5 equals 1, and B over 5 equals negative 1. Now, this says B over 5, which is B divided by 5. The opposite of division is multiplication. So to undo this division problem, we're going to multiply both sides by 5. And we're going to get that B equals 5. Over here in our second equation, when we multiply both sides by 5, we're going to get that B equals negative 5. So in these first two examples, we had the same number, just both the positive and negative of them to be the answers. That's not always the case, so it's very important that you write out the second equation and you work it out. All right, here's another example. Our absolute value sign is by itself. There's nothing behind it and nothing in front of it. So what we're going to do is set up our two equations. Negative 4 plus 5x equals 16. And then our second equation is going to be negative 4 plus 5x equals negative 16. All right, we're going to work on the one on the left first. So first, we're going to add 4 to both sides. This cancels out. 5x equals 20. 5 times x, the opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by 5. X is going to equal 4. That is one of our answers. So now let's go over here to our right-hand problem and work it out. Again, we're going to add 4 to both sides. So we'll have 5x equals negative 12 divided by 5 divided by 5. X is going to equal negative 12 divided by 5, or you can say negative 2.4. So here's an example where All we did was switch this equal sign from the positive integer to the negative, but we got two very different answers down here. And we can double check that they're both right by plugging them into the equation, and you'll see that it still works. So 5 times 4 is 20. Negative 4 plus 20 is 16. Boom, we got it. All right, 5 times negative 2.4. Oops. 5, we'll double clear it. 5 times negative, oops, I don't know how to use this calculator well, do I? Let's do negative 2.4 times 5. It's going to give us negative 12 minus 4. It's going to give us negative 16. Our absolute value of negative 16 is 16. All right, let's keep moving forward here. Again, remember we need to isolate the absolute value. We need to get the absolute value by itself before we can start working on our problem. So over here, we have a minus 5 to the right of it. Well, we need to get rid of that first. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. So now we'll have the absolute value of v plus 8 equals 7. And now this is where we're going to write our two equations. So v plus 8 equals 7. V plus 8 equals negative 7. So we're going to subtract 8 from both sides. V is going to equal negative 1. And again, subtract 8 from both sides over here. V is going to equal negative 15. All right, well, let's just double check it. All right, so negative 1 plus 8 gives us negative 7. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7, minus 5 is 2. We're good to go. All right, negative 15 plus 8 gives us negative 7. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7, minus 5 is 2. They both work. But you have to remember to isolate, get this absolute value all by itself. You need to only have what is inside the absolute value signs before we can start this process of writing the two equations. All right, so we've got this negative 5 coefficient out here, negative 5 times the absolute value of 3 plus 4k. We need to divide both sides by negative 5. And that's going to give us the absolute value of 3 plus 4k equals 115 divided by 5, 23. And it's a positive 23 because we're doing negative 115 divided by negative 5. When you divide a negative by a negative, we get a positive. So now we're going to start writing our two equations. 3 plus 4k equals 23. And 3 plus 4k equals negative 23. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides first. We'll have that 4k equals 20. Divide both sides by 4. K is going to equal 5 in this first equation. Subtract 3 from both sides. We're going to have that 4k equals negative 26. We're going to divide both sides by 4. We're going to have that k equals negative 6.5. You can leave it in fraction form if you want to as well, just to put it in simplest terms. So that would be negative 13 over 2. Either or, just make sure that you check what they're asking for in the equation or in the answer. That way you know which form to put it in. So here's some examples. Check the chart in Google Classroom. I think you guys will do well on this. You just have to remember to write two equations after you get the absolute value sign by itself. You must get the absolute value sign by itself. And then you'll write your equation with the answer that is given and then the opposite of the answer that is given. If you have any questions, as always, contact me on Google Classroom, remind or send me an email, and I will be happy to walk through some more problems with you. Have a great day.